Scavine, Dion, Lee,
Here.
Pereira,
Here.
Chair Olivia LeBeau.
Here. Counselor Dion will be joining us momentarily. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Item 1 is citizens' input. Do we have anything submitted? No. Item 2 is the minutes of the November 23rd, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Motion to approve is made by Councilor Lee, seconded by Councilor Pereira. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Items 3, 4, and 5 are all proposed ordinances. However, I've spoke to our corporation counsel who was working with Attorney Goldberg on this, and Attorney Goldberg is in the hospital. So what I'd like to do is table them so we don't.
Motion to table?
Do we
Madam Chair, if I could.
individually?
The items are currently tabled.
They're tabled, so we just don't lift them and we're all set? Okay. So then we will skip down to number 6, which would be the resolution trash collection and proposal for the CART program, which was referred November 30th, 2021. And if we could have, I saw Mr. Perry here and Attorney Ramsey come to the table.
Sorry. I was on the end of the agenda. This is great. Somebody sit.
No,
You are.
All right, thank you.
you can, sure.
All right.
So I did speak to Corporation Counsel about this the other day, and there isn't, what we did was we sent this straight from the City Council meeting last Tuesday here, and we're looking to update our ordinance so that it reflects the trash collection and the carts. And do you want to just bring everyone up to speed on that?
Yeah, so in the ordinance, I mean, there is some ambiguity when it comes to the commercial refuse collection. So it states that businesses shall put their carts out for curbside collection, you know, the same way that it would say for a private residential. But as we've discussed, I believe that the intent of that was, you know, for them to put, and I think, Councilor, you pointed this out, was for them to put it out for a private hauler to collect, not for city collection. So I think, you know, some easy language to implement would be along the lines of shall put out in the proper container for outside vendor to pick up. Something along those lines, or something that just basically states a new ordinance piece that would state the city of Fall River does not collect commercial refuse. Something as simple as that would clearly state and remove any ambiguity from it and make that determination. So that way, when we do move to get rid of the business collection, it's clear and everybody is on board and they all realize it.
Okay, and I think it's important to keep the piece in about when they have to put theirs out for a private hauler, so that they're not putting it out days ahead and leaving their barrels out there for an extended length of time. So that still needs to be in there, as long as it's clear that it's for their own private pickup.
Right, I agree with that as well. I think it's important for us to make sure that they understand we would like their trash put out on the same route collection days as the other businesses, on the other residential collection in their areas. So we don't want trash bins out on different areas of the street all days of the week. So we'd like to keep that uniformity, so I think that's a good point on your end as well.
Would that be up to their private hauler, though, what day they're picking up?
I mean, I think as a city, I have the right as the director, and whether it be me or anybody else in that seat, to dictate when that collection should be. I don't see why we can't, you know, take the lead on that and let them know that, you know, you must place cart on curbside same day as residential pickup for private vendor collection.
Okay, and then I just wanted to go back to conversation at the meeting on Tuesday as to the timing of this. We obviously need this in place before you send the letter out to the businesses.
Correct.
But I've heard different dates on when that letter would go out to the businesses, and you're going to give them 60 days so they can get something else in place?
Yeah, so February had been a month that was mentioned. I think we need to push that back a little bit, and let's say April. Definitely have it in place for the beginning of the fiscal year, and prior to that, ideally. So I think by May, we should be able to have that, and we'll gain May and June as far as revenue that we'll save.
All right, so
Not
I just heard
revenue.
February and then April, and then
Right,
then
so-
it just automatically got bumped.
right,
So
so-
every month, it costs us
It
money?
costs us
So sending the, having the ordinance adjusted, I don't think is that time-consuming. So we need to give them their letter and their notice. But I think as one member of the council, we should have a definite date on when that letter's going to go out and when it's going to be implemented.
Right, so I would say we send that letter out ASAP, as soon as possible. We change the language, get it passed through at the next council meeting, and then we send the letter out, and as you said, give them 60 days, which it would put us at January and February, and then in April, we'll start the process, which is why I think I said May, meaning that process would be complete. So it'll be a 2-week process for us to collect all the totes. Not every business is going to put it out every week. So we'll follow the truck each week. We'll take a separate private easy truck. They will do just the businesses on each day's collection. And our DPW staff will follow behind that truck and collect those totes from those businesses. We'll run that same system a second week in consecutive, in succession. And then by that point, we should have all of the bins off of the street.
So if you do the notice at the beginning of January, so you've given them January and February, and then you do your pickup of the bins in March,
Correct. So by April, we should be hopefully.
so by April 1st.
Correct.
Okay. Counselor Dion?
Yeah, two things. I know with private haulers, because I have a private hauler, have since day one, they had to agree to pick up trash on the day that the city picks up.
Correct.
So they had no leeway in that.
That's
So
right.
I would think that would be something that we could follow through with in terms of businesses,
Absolutely.
because they are being picked up on a regular city trash day as it is.
Mhm.
My question would be, would we need to make an amendment to the easy contract or ratify it in some manner, saying that now Exhibit H is
H.
excluded from the contract?
We could amend the contract. I think that'd be a question for Corporation Council. I think as long as there's an agreement in place between Easy and the city in writing, we may not need to amend the contract, make new copies, pass them out to everybody. I think we just have it on paper, an addendum attached to the contract that states that as of this date, we're ceasing commercial collection of Exhibit H.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with whatever
But
makes
again,
it.
I think that would be a legal question for
Yep.
council.
Okay.
Basically, that's what I have. I yield.
Counselor Lee?
Just regarding the letter, I asked a question at the meeting about hybrid places where businesses and residential, and you said, I believe you said you're going to leave at least one barrel or two.
So when you look at the carts, you have a barcode and you have a serial number. Those serial numbers are designated to those particular addresses. So if there are 5 carts at a mixed-use property, we will be able to identify which carts belong to the businesses and which carts belong to the residential. And then at that point, we'll take back the businesses and we'll leave the residential properties with their existing carts.
Will there be sort of that language that you just stated, will that be part of the letter that goes out to the businesses so that way they know the difference
We
between
can certainly put some language in there, and another piece to this would be outreach. So I've already
Sure.
spoken to my compliance division and let them know that we will be going out to each of these businesses and trying to talk to them, letting them know what is happening, why it's happening, and what we'll be doing. So that'll be part of that conversation, and we can certainly put some brief language in the letter that would designate that.
Thank you. I yield.
Before I address Counselor Dion again, Counselor Berger?
Does it say on there business or commercial?
So we have two different, so you have commercial, it actually says commercial,
So-
but in the commercial ordinance stated placement of refuse from commercial establishments on sidewalk, the first word in that subsection is business establishments, stores, restaurants, laundries, et cetera. So it uses both terms to
I
describe
think it needs to be
commercial.
clarified. If you're gonna say commercial, then are we looking at 6 families as being commercial?
So 6
And are we
tenements,
doing that as well?
yeah, so 6 tenement, right now, we're not doing the 6 tenements.
Okay.
It's part of the conversation. I'm not sure if you saw, I just sent out the email today for another task force meeting. I suggested dates of Monday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. So right now, the 6 tenement have not. But if you look, that would be another ordinance we would need to change, because when you look at the ordinance for trash collection, it says the city shall collect residential properties up to 6 units. So that would be another language change once we started thinking about the 6 tenement properties that we would have to revisit.
So current, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, that's not on the agenda to go into that.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that in that, when you say commercial, you were talking about businesses only.
Yeah, and interestingly
At this
enough, I've learned recently that, and it was at a council meeting here when we had the assessor's office here to talk about the tax rate. Commercial property, 6 tenements are considered commercial properties, but they are taxed at a residential rate, so it gets a little murky there. So I think that'll be part of the discussion for that
Okay.
when we get to that point.
All right, I yield, thank you.
Counselor Dion?
Yeah, I just have one more question. This came up in a conversation today, actually. I've had people in the past comment how sometimes businesses will put their trash in barrels that are on the sidewalk or located in front of other people's properties, and I'm sure you've come across that. So I'm thinking with this change, that might occur a little bit more. And it's not only businesses, residential people do it as well. Is there some type of cover or something that we could put on the barrels that would allow only for disposal of something up to a certain size, as opposed to people being able to actually put trash bags inside of a barrel?
Yeah, so if you look at 62-43, separation of garbage, rubbish disposal, garbage from commercial establishments, subsection B of that states, commercial and business establishments shall segregate their garbage in watertight containers made of material and equipment with suitable handles for tight-fitting covers. So, I mean, if you're putting something other than just trash in a cart for ABC or Cleanway or whatever company they choose, I think if that's where you're heading with this, I may be misinterpreting it.
No, I think I wasn't clear on my question, I'm sorry. So we have little barrels,
Regular,
receptacles,
yeah.
regular, on the
Okay.
streets for people to put trash in.
Okay, like the city
Like South Main
receptacle,
Street,
South Main
right.
Street barrel, okay, yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
So I guess there are situations and times
Yeah.
where people,
Yeah.
businesses, whatever,
Certainly.
are putting trash bags full of trash in those, so they don't have to deal with it themselves. So I guess my question is there a way to put some type of cover that would allow for an object only up to a certain size to alleviate or eliminate that problem?
Yeah, so some of those receptacles that you see have a metal frame that goes around the top. The hole is much smaller. It's probably about a 6 or an 8-inch hole, and you throw those in. We've had many of those. Over the years, they break, they get ripped off, things of that nature. So, I mean, we could look at, trying to replace those, something along those lines, trying to replace the barrel. But honestly, it's a problem where we see that people just aren't conscientious, they just don't care. The business is right there, they throw their trash right out in the receptacle that's in front of their business. So at that point, it's tasked our compliance division to get out there and try to identify who did this. It's a tough find sometimes, because people are smart enough to know not to put certain things in there that'll identify them. But it's a fight we continue to fight. Changing every one of the barrels would be, a little bit of a task, so we'll see if we can try to repair and or replace some of those, but it's something we can look at, see how many of them are actually broken, and then go from there. Even that, though, that metal frame can just be lifted up. You'd have to put a lock. You put a lock,
Right.
it's time consuming when you go to empty it, but if it's gonna help settle the issue, that's something we can surely look at.
Well, if compliance can deal with the bulk of the problem,
And I don't think it's rampant, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't think it's rampant. There are several areas where it does happen. It's not rampant, but there are certain barrels that it continues to happen. And those particular ones, we've pretty much identified who they are. You may have a car just pull up on a Saturday night when nobody's around and just throw it in. We can't, necessarily stop that,
Right.
but we can look at trying to cover them better.
okay, thank you. With that, I yield.
Anything further?
Well, people can put locks on the regular, I'm sorry, people can put locks on the regular one that they have now, right?
I'd ask that they don't. Those bins, the carts don't belong to the resident. They belong to the city. And if they're drilling holes in them and putting locks with hasps on them, I mean, it's gonna be tough for us, you know, when we take them back or it breaks, now we gotta take the hasp off. We gotta unscrew it, it's got holes in it, possibly not watertight anymore, things of that nature. So I would ask people not to do that. Years ago, when I actually worked on the trucks and collected trash, some people would put lids on their regular trash barrels and actually put locks on them, and it hampered our collection process. People would drill holes in them and tie rope or string, and then the barrel's the lid is hanging on the barrel while you're trying to dump it. So we don't have those traditional barrels anymore, but I think that would hamper us more. We need to just work with people to try to get them to comply.
Guys, I have seen that happen, but I don't think it's, you know, all over the place, but I
Yeah.
have seen it happen.
Yeah.
But you do have to actually do something to it in order to make the lock, so it's almost like damaging the property.
Yeah, that's right,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, all right, thank you, Ayo.
Anything further? So we would need two motions on this. We need a motion to refer to Corporation Council.
Motion to refer.
Second.
Motion to refer to Corporation Council made by Counselor Lee, seconded by Counselor Dion. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. And the second motion would be a motion to table in committee.
Motion to table.
Motion to table made by Counselor Lee, seconded by Counselor Dion. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also have the compost. You want to wait for that?
Well, we gotta wait
That
for
got
We're gonna
ta-
wait.
That's
Table?
remaining on the
Yes.
table until.
It's remaining on the
yeah,
table.
we got
Okay,
that.
so you're good with me?
We are?
All right, thank you, guys. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
You too, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Aye.
Salary amendments.
I don't think you're gonna need me for 7, but I'll stick around for 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think we're all set on salary schedule as long as Mrs. Sahadi's here.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Item 7 is the proposed ordinance of salary amendments, which was referred November 30th, 2021. Mrs. Sahadi is joining us, and I believe she has a couple of updates she's going to share with us on the schedule that's before us.
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Sahadi?
Yes, thank you. So there are a couple of changes on page 2, actually, all three of them are on page 2. So on page 2, starting with the Commissioner for Recreational Facilities / Director of Recreational Facilities, it's the 5th item down. That is the Nancy Smith position that was created back in 2019. And the appointment letter apparently had been missed and not going down to, or went down to the city clerk's office, but that is the position. The next position is the old position when she was considered an administrator. So we will be sending down for the next city council meeting an ordinance change to remove that position. And the third one in that row is the assistant commissioner, and that's Chris Pirano. So that's just to kind of put them in order as to who they are. So Chris is actually considered an assistant commissioner.
So on the one that's with our agenda, I don't see the Assistant Commissioner on page 2.
Right, that's the correction.
It wasn't, because it was on here before.
No, I don't believe it was.
Okay. So the first one is Parks.
The first one is Parks,
The second one is,
vacant and will be removed. And the third one, the assistant, is Chris.
and which of these are filled in the budget?
Parks and Chris, Nancy Smith.
Okay, the other one that's vacant is not,
That's correct.
doesn't have a line item in the budget?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the other change, under asset manager, it's a couple of items down, so it's asset manager / GIS. The salary was just incorrect. That individual is actually making $63,059.77, which is the maximum.
Is that
It's, yeah,
Asset manager / GIS.
And it has, on the other one, it has it as
45.
45?
right, I grabbed the wrong information when I first filled in the current salaries.
Okay,
And that's it, that's the only changes.
okay. I did have, is anyone, any discussion? Or are you still making those changes?
The only thing I can say that we did do with the recommendation of Council Kadim initially is, you'll notice that the assistant to the director is always the same percentage as the director. So that was a recommendation of Council Kadim. So that is one thing that changed from back in the original presentations that you received on the salary ordinances back starting sometime last March.
I do have one question. The Director of Municipal Buildings and Code Enforcement, that is our building inspector, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the current not to exceed is 91. I'm sorry. Yeah, the current not to exceed is 91. Current salary is 89. In this,
The recommended is 120.
okay, so we'll be able to give
That-
what a prior administration had promised that individual.
That's correct.
Okay.
Actually, I believe what the prior administration, because I was here during that time, I believe the prior administration agreed to give that individual the same increases that ASME would have gotten. So
Mhm.
that would have brought that particular employee to 96,348, and he's only currently earning 89,320.
Okay, so it's gonna go to that, and so that's more than what was, so is that in the budget? Because I don't remember that amount being in the budget, I remember it being lower.
Some amount, I didn't bring my budget book with me, but there is an amount in other personnel services to accommodate, I believe, to the 96.
Okay. Okay.
But I can check that for
I
you.
can pull my budget book too, because I'd like to make sure that that's there, or, and if it's not, that we'll be able to move it. One, because it was promised years ago, and two, because that person works 24/7.
Agree.
Anytime anything is happening, answers every call, and if there's anything happening, fire, car into a building, anything, that's a 24/7 position.
Agree.
And that is deserved, and I'm upset to learn that something was promised by a prior administration and not given. Do you have any questions, Counselor Lee?
No.
Do you, Counselor Dion?
So, in ordinance not to exceed, these date back to 2017, which is 4 years ago.
Right.
So, based on the recommended and where we are now, I think, the thing I always have an issue or a problem with is, it's like I've said in the past, it allows for everything to be brought up to the max at any point in time. Is that fair to say?
And not to exceed, that's correct. To
Right.
pay somebody based on what their resume requires, basically.
So, assuming that this would go through, are we gonna update every year? Is it gonna be a 2, 3, or 4-year process again? I think I'm concerned with the process and where we're at that time. For, for example, so we're already either at the not to exceed, or in some cases above the not to exceed, and now we're making ordinance conform to the salaries versus the salaries conform to ordinance. So.
Well, if I may, so section and as you might be able to speak to me on the section, I think it's 305. So section 305 in the ordinance allows these not to exceeds to increase based on what the ASME contract has been adjusted to. So whatever the not to exceed is, if somebody is at that maximum to begin with, they are earning the same increase that the ASME contract is earning each year, and that is spelled out in a separate section within the ordinance. So we wouldn't be going back to, or coming back to the city council on an annual basis In this particular instance, it was 3 years ago, or actually 4 years ago now, because it was 7/1/17. I would expect that the same thing would happen going forward. If you look at the recommended amounts, they all are higher, if you will, so that they can accommodate for those increases.
And I think my other issue is the fact that at the present time, with deficits, et cetera, you know, are we able to, and I get it. Believe me, I get that Fall River is lower than a lot of places when it comes to paying people a salary. I'm not discounting that at all. But it's still the fact of whether we're lower than other communities or not, can we afford it? And if we can't, what do we do about that?
Well, right now, the only thing we can afford, if you look at it from a budgetary point of view, is whatever's in the budget for fiscal '22. For fiscal '23, it would be within the mayor's purview to increase any salaries that he felt he wanted to increase, assuming there was revenue to support the appropriations.
But okay, so I guess in that same vein, this year we had increases that, though they may have been in the budget, we weren't able to afford it and the money wasn't there to pay it. So I think that's what I worry about moving forward. And I also worry about the fact that we have individuals who have been with the city a long time. I don't want to refer to anybody that sounds like I'm slighting them at all, but isn't in the upper echelon, so to speak. And they're the ones who get the insignificant, small raises, and I feel like it's just not always fair. You know, some of those people need to be brought up to speed, I think, a little quicker than the people at the top of the ladder. And not to say the people at the top of the ladder don't earn their pay. I don't know, I just have a hard time with this whole thing, and especially with this year, with the deficits and us just not being in the best place. I guess for now I'll yield.
Council Pryor?
I agree that I think some of our hardest workers are the lowest paid. However, that's up to the unions to be able to negotiate that for their workers, and negotiate that with the city. But to do this in ordinance style does not mean that, you know, anybody is going to get the maximum. It just gives a space for it to go to. And when people are getting 1.5% or what have you, then that also goes towards the directors, and these salaries just need to be in line with that, so that we're not coming back here. This has been going on, or for all the years that I've been here, changing the ordinances and updating them, and yes, you can only give people what money we have in the budget to give, but I absolutely 100% believe that some of our workers here should be getting paid more. We shouldn't have a single mother working here with 2 kids who needs a second job or who's on food stamps. That really gets me. People should be paid a decent salary, and maybe that's something that we look at in the budget, that we talk to, that we address with this mayor, any mayor, that, you know, when they're going in for negotiations, that we talk about. But, like every year, things go up, and how do we get the money in and try to pay for it to give these people that? Then money needs to be raised through taxes or generated because things go up, or you need to come up with some solutions. I think Council Lee and Councilor Dion were on a thread with me that somebody had sent us about these pieces of steel that are put in, it's like a turbine in water pipes, in main water pipes, that would increase water. I know we're not here to talk about water, but
And generate electricity.
things like that, to generate electricity, to be able to lessen the amount of money they're spending for electricity on any of our municipal buildings, those are some of the things we look at, because I know we don't want to go into taxpayers' pocket. But the fact is, if you want to pay people, then you need to, the money needs to come in to be able to do that.
Right.
But we've done this where we've had a table, and you really can't do the table because some people come in with different experience. That's why the ordinance, they changed it to do it to ordinance, that ordinance was better. And that's where we stand, so, I'm okay with it. I know that, you know, we're not gonna just be giving out a lot. And sometimes what happens is, you have one person that has one job, and then somebody leaves, and then you make one person do two jobs, so then you've gotta give them a little bit more to do that job. And that happened here with Nancy Smith, when then Nancy did parks, and then she did cemeteries, and that kinda got a little bit mixed up. But now she's not doing parks, so it should go back to what it was before. And I think that, you know, administrations need to keep an eye on that, a handle on that. But with that, I yield.
And you were right, Counselor, we are currently negotiating with a number of the unions.
And I agree, people need more money.
I agree as well, Council Pereira. And Mrs. Sahadi, though, in certain instances, though, isn't it what they come in at? There's steps, and then that's it. Once they get to the top, there's nothing higher than that. Like, I'm thinking of the clerks.
The clerks, that would be correct.
So
So the
what is their
clerks are
top
on-
step?
The clerks, that's correct.
Do you know what the top step is off the top of your head?
Well, it depends on what classification they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Because ASME will include everybody from the people that work for Paul, that are tradesmen at the water treatment plant that he has spoken about, to clerks in this building
Mhm.
who work in our individual offices. So it really just depends what category they are in, what grade they are in the union.
So, for instance, the
classification.
ones, I don't mean to get off topic, but to Council Pereira's point, the ones that are, the clerks that are in this building,
Mhm.
there's only four steps, correct?
Approximately
And
four
if I remember
steps, yeah.
correctly, the fourth step isn't,
No,
very
that's
much.
correct. You're correct.
so how does that get changed?
That's what we're negotiating now.
Okay, all right. And then I had,
Can I add something?
Now,
What
I'm-
Mrs. Sahadi said about AFSCME and the different unions, and I agree with you, that clerks here are in the same union as the workers that we had at the water department. Yet the water department is to trade, where they need to have certain licenses, et cetera. So if it's gonna be across the board that they're gonna get a 1%, that's nothing. I mean, not that clerks that work here don't do a good job, but if you're a clerk in one office versus being at the water department where you need to have all this, AFSCME's all lumped together. We have them with, I believe they're with dispatchers, clerks.
yeah,
um,
mechanics,
mechanics.
electricians. It's a
Mechanics
hard
and-
union to negotiate.
but I believe they also have MOUs that they can put,
Right,
correct?
which is what we
to
just did with the electricians and mechanics and with the water as well.
So that can be addressed in that way. But I just remember seeing the steps for instance, for the clerks in this building, and it's
Nothing.
nothing.
And then I had somebody from the water department tell me that if they wanted to get out of AFSCME and join another union, they have to be without a union for 1 year before getting another union. So nobody wants to be, you know, not represented for an entire year. So it's kind of a struggle for them. But, I mean, I've said that I think people, you know, deserve more. How crazy with the water department for what we're paying people, but now we're paying a company for 3 months.
Come on, money.
$75,000 for 3 months. But the director couldn't get a lousy $8,000 raise. So,
We're having the same problem in IT right now.
IT, I mean, my niece is in IT, she makes 3 figures,
Right.
you know?
That's the problem. And we just lost another employee in IT.
So, Mrs. Sadi, I just wanted to clarify 2 other things. In the personnel section, the last one for per contract, 5302, any of these that are currently not to exceed are going to be changing to just a straight per contract?
That's the intention, that's correct.
Okay, so for instance, the last page, the Director of Community Maintenance, the very top one, it's a not to exceed, that's going to, which is out of ordinance, that's going to be changing to a per contract?
That's correct.
Okay. And then,
Well, right now, I believe his contract included the ASME increases.
Mhm.
So technically, he's being underpaid what he could be paid as of 7/1/20.
I see that, okay. But the not to exceed will not come into play anymore for this, correct?
Top of the next page, yeah.
She doesn't make that now.
No, she makes this now. Because this would have increased each of those
Each year.
years, because that was the ordinance in 17.
So those are going to change, so that will be a per contract, it will no longer be a not to exceed?
Right.
And the bottom one
I
is,
think those three, for whatever reason, just got overlooked the last time the rest of these went to per contract. Because if you're per contract, it doesn't make any sense that you're not to exceed.
correct, so that was that one. And which other one? The chief of staff,
Chief of Staff and Director of Financial Services.
financial services, okay. And then the last question I had, and it's just the one that jumps out at me because it's a big jump, is under the request by Mr. Furland, the administrator is jumping up to 140. I'm not saying that they're getting this. I want people to understand that they're not getting this. But that would be the new ceiling on,
That would be the new ceiling. And a lot of these ceilings were actually looked at with comps and what were the same position being paid in comparable communities. The communities in particular that I used, that I had access to was New Bedford, Lowell, Lawrence, and Brockton.
now where they're their own fund, that would only come before us in their budget if they wanted to make those adjustments, correct?
That's correct.
So that would be part of their budget for the new year. And the reason I'm asking that is, the water rates were just approved. And I'm not saying anybody doesn't deserve to be paid adequately, but it just is not hitting me right that now these are in front of us for big jumps. Again, not that that's what they'd be getting, but we're going from the current not to exceed is 103 to 140, 89 to 112, and then the rest are 82, 69, and 72, moving up to 95.
And you can see that a number of those people aren't being paid the maximum right now anyway.
Okay.
So I wouldn't expect that the mayor would approve those increases to, with the exception of the administrator, he is actually being paid the maximum, but the others that you just read from are all under the ordinance except for this project specialist. Oh, I'm sorry, and the project manager, they're at ordinance.
So do you think it's necessary at this time to push those recommended up that high?
It's really up to this committee and full council. You can reduce those if you so choose.
Okay. I'll yield for now. Councilor Lee?
Just not really inclined to see the increases that high, just not in one department, but in, many others, during a situation where we're talking about, financial struggles and we're depending a lot on one-time money and things like that. And so I'm just voicing that opinion that I'm not obviously inclined to do so. Are we voting for these separately or are we voting for these all together?
You can make amendments, Counselor, if you wanted to. We can vote as amendment, as is, as if you wanted to make amendments.
But
Yeah.
normally you would vote for the table that goes into, correct, section 5301. So
Okay.
you wouldn't vote each one of them
Okay.
individually. I just want to certainly let you know, and I agree that we have some financial issues. I certainly brought those forward to the council. But we've also done some comps, and we definitely need to be conscious of the fact that we are probably the lowest paid community in all of these management positions. And what happens is we lose them. So we lost our engineer, we lost our planner, we lost somebody in IT this week. So, I mean, you've got to be cautious, and I get it, because we obviously have to raise revenue in order to fund these positions. But on the flip side of that, you've heard Mr. Furlan talk about his staff. We're increasing those. The chief couldn't keep his mechanics and electricians, and we're increasing those. So at some point, the city of Fall River has to step up and be comparable to other communities.
I just don't see it as a sustainable model long-term to keep on increasing. And then are we, the people who are tasked with paying these salaries, paying these increases, it's not like we're seeing a lot of growth. It's not like we're seeing people we're not an affluent city, you know, and comparable, if we're gonna compare to other towns and other places, even where the city planner went, other places, they're going to places that can actually that they have the tax base to afford it. They're not going to.
To some extent,
I mean-
actually, our city planner went to Taunton,
Mhm.
so that's about the same in terms of comparable.
They don't
Certainly-
have the same challenges that we have.
I believe they do. They do.
There's a CSO issue in Taunton like there is in Fall River?
They may not have a CSO issue, but they have financial issues.
Oh,
in
I'm not,
Taunton as well.
every town can claim that they have a financial issue, but we are very unique here. And that's the reason why things are the way they are. But, okay, I mean, all right, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see, but we're gonna know all about our financial issues next year, I know. But, the other thing too, when we start to see these infrastructural, investments, the way that we were talking about with the water department, and I was also an in-sewer, and I was on that same chain, and it's that link that was sent to us was the same exact link that I brought up during the summertime about their in-pipe turbines. That again, when Mr. Ferlin comes to the floor and he tells us about the fixed cost, electricity costs, and things like that, those are the kind of things that we try to bring up to try to bite into, so that way we can bring these costs down a little more, you know. But I would argue to some of the homeowners and business owners in the city that, you know, when we tell them they're on the low end, when they're scraping by, when they're trying to do what they can do to put food on the table, I think I'm not saying that you are insulting anyone, but it is I think that they would feel insulted if I told them, oh no, you're good, you know, and compared to other places, you're fine. This is where they live. This is where they have to spend their money. This is where they have to pay their bills. And we can't keep on pointing everywhere else to make a justification to add more to the taxpayer. I think you can't argue your way to this. It's real life. People actually live these lives and have to pay these bills every single day. So I'm going to get off the soapbox on this. I'll yield and I'll just go on that. But it's just, I hear it all the time. It is what it is, I guess.
Are there any that you're considering amending?
Negative.
Councilor Dion?
Yeah, I guess, my only comment would be that, yes, we may be, lower, we may pay less than other communities, but our income per capita is much lower than most. I don't know what the average income per capita is in Taunton, but I know that in Fall River, you're looking at 28,000, 30,000, which is in this day and age
36.
absolutely horrible, horrible. And it's always fine to say we need to step up, but if you don't have a dime left in your pocket, you can't take it out of your pocket. I think we need to start concentrating on creating the revenues, finding a way to step up. You know, and I've always said it, I don't care if we come up with something that nets us 50,000 extra dollars in a year in our budget. It's still $50,000. And that 50,000 might fund 3 or 4 of these positions for the recommended up to. I don't think we do enough of that. I think we need to do more of that. I don't know. Again, as much as I understand some of these people, I think too, some of these ceilings are just too high at this point in time. I don't really know where to go from there, but, you know, how many cities compare to us in the number of nonprofits who aren't contributing to the community? How many other, I know we're only, I believe at this point, second to Boston in terms of facilities that are helping, you know, with addiction, et cetera, like other communities, they're not stepping up. We're taking the load. And not to say that we shouldn't be helping people, but the fact is, Fall River is always taking the big bite, and everybody else is sitting back letting us do it. So sometimes to compare one community to another is not fair, because they're not stepping up and doing what we're doing in other areas that are actually, in the long run, to a certain extent, hurting us a bit financially. So with that, I'll yield.
Councilor Burr?
Maybe those nonprofits should be paying for us to get rid of their trash, because their directors are making $300,000 or better, and we are taking it. And that's a fight that I've had for years. And I hear from other people, well, you're the city, so the towns come in. And I just, I don't buy it. I think that there is drug addiction behavior all over in cities and in towns. And we shouldn't be the only ones doing the right thing by trying to help people. Other communities should be doing likewise. As far as the ordinances here and what their limit is, the up to this amount doesn't mean that that's the amount anybody's gonna get. It's only to cover us to be within the ordinance, when union contracts come in and it gets increased. The question that I have is, in the water department, all of the ones here, who votes on that? Is that just a vote of the water board and not a vote of the council or anything? Is it just the water board that votes?
Well, you vote the ordinance.
Right.
So they don't vote the ordinance, but
Right.
Paul will answer, I guess, the question as to who votes their increase in their salaries.
Yeah,
Yeah, so,
thank you.
good, yeah, good evening, council. So all city, all water department employees, the ordinance set by the council, but any raises are per the mayor, so all the water department employees are higher at the mayor's will, so,
Okay.
again, that's how that would be.
Not that the water board takes a vote, and too bad.
Nope, it wouldn't be the water board that sets anybody's pay rate.
All right. With that, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for that explanation.
So, Mrs. Sahadi, the only, I would have recommendations for amendments just based on what most of them are being recommended at compared to, and there's just a few that stick out that are more than the others. So the director of buildings, like we just talked about, that one, and I don't see these as going past, even when that increase is given, as in the next 3 years, it going past that. So, like right now, it's at 96, and the recommended is 120, the recommended not to exceed. So for me, like, I don't think, seeing how it goes with the ASME contract, I don't see it getting to 120 or it needing to be at 120 at this time. Does that make sense? I think I would be more comfortable if it was 110. And on the flip side of that, I feel as if and this would be an internal thing, along those same lines of reasoning with the director of municipal buildings and code enforcement, the director of minimum housing is low. The notes say seems low, but it is low compared to the amount of work coming out of that office, especially in the city. And I talk to them all the time about empty, vacant buildings and what they do to track these owners down, try and find them, reach out to them, send them their fines for their vacant buildings, clean up the properties, listen, to the neighbors' complaints. And we always see it every spring when the grass is 6 feet high, but this is a year-round issue with the amount of vacant buildings that they deal with, besides all of the things that minimum housing deals with. I was in their office the other day, they're getting no heat calls, they deal with landlords, tenants, all of that. They end up being an intermediary of sorts. So that one would be one that I would agree with, that it seems low. Maybe the recommended is fine, but I feel, and would like to say that salary currently is low. And then the other one that I questioned, and I know you said you did this on a percentage basis, but the assistant purchasing agent, I know that it's vacant. The current not to exceed is 38. And was it just the percentage basis that we used to move it to the 68?
Well, the percentage, yes. We moved the purchasing agent to comps. So, we don't have one of those at the moment either, because
It's included.
it's included in Tammy's salary.
Okay.
But if we did, then the 85 is the average based on the comps that we looked at. And so, using Councilor Kadim's recommendation, the 80% is consistent
So
with.
it was a recommendation, so I see one is 70% of the directors, and this one's 80%. Is it supposed to be 80% or 70%?
I think we used 80 for all of them except that one, and honestly, I'm not 100% sure why that one was chosen to be, because that's not an assistant, that's a project manager.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
I knew there had to be a reason.
And then the only other one that jumps out is the community utilities. The current is 108. Even if there was a bump given there, I think having, actually, they're out of ordinance right now because the current,
No, he's in, because it's 108 and he's.
oh, with
receiving
the
108.
ASME, got it, okay. So the 140 to me, it's just the highest one, so unfortunately it jumps out. I'm not comfortable with that number there. I know we get to vote on it. I'm just not comfortable with that number hanging out there compared
Do
to
you-
all of the
do
other
you have-
ones.
Do you have a recommendation for that one?
I mean, it looks like if, so say it just went by the AFSMI, it went, what, up 3, maybe 4,000? So if it went just by the AFSMI, it would be, the current plus 4,000 would be 112. And then if there was any other increase, per the administration, I don't know what that would be. That wouldn't be my, my place to say, but, I mean, I would think 125 would get us through, but unless there have been conversations that I'm not privy to. I just know that people will see this and jump to the conclusion, that even though every counselor here has said it, that these are not, that this is what all of these people are going to be getting, the second that we vote on this, and that's not the case. Did you have any thoughts on that one?
I know I can certainly bring
You want to
that.
make a motion to bring that to 125?
Unless, Mr. Berlin, did you want to address any of these here?
Yeah, if you want, I can talk a little bit about comparables
Yep.
for the communities and what our job entails, which I think some of you know what our job entails in Water and Sewer Department. The administrator, myself, I oversee the Water and Sewer Department, $40 million a year budget, over 100 employees. We're currently doing about $70 million in construction, which is overseen by myself and some of my staff. Comparables for my position, so a deputy administrator in some of the other communities, they didn't have administrative salaries, most of them were per contract and stuff like that. But if I run through some of the deputies, Brockton, 206,000. Lowell, 203,000, Taunton, 144,000, Lawrence, 223,000.
I'm sorry, those were the deputy administrators,
Yeah.
not the administrator?
Yeah, that's what was able to find. Again, it's $40 million of the budget. It's probably the second largest after the school department portion of the budget that we do manage. With all of the construction, we probably have some of the most construction going on dollar-wise throughout the city, besides the Big Durfee project that just concluded. You guys, we've talked about our operators down here in their issues. Just to talk about some of the other increases that were in here. Director of Water Department. That one was recommended to be increased again because of comparables. Comparables, you're talking 1 to 150 in other communities on the low side. And that's just for Director of Water Department, Director of Distribution and Maintenance. Again, same comparables. Director of Treatment Resources had right around the same comparables. Again, I do both water and sewer department, so it's not just overseeing water department as some of those directors do. So when you're looking at just a director that oversees a water department within a community, making $150,000 a year, the comparables. And just to talk to some of the other communities that we compared to, you look at New Bedford. New Bedford has CSO issues. They have an older water system, which they haven't upgraded as much as we have in recent past years. their water rate's comparable to us, their sewer rate is higher. You look at Taunton.
What did you say the comparables were for New Bedford?
So comparables for New Bedford, what we had here was a deputy administrator of $206,000, director of water department, $145,000, director of water distribution maintenance at $154,000, and director of treatment and resources at $118,000.
So did they just have a deputy and not an administrator of community utilities?
Yeah, there wasn't anything that I could find, so, they have a little bit of a different structure there. They have a Department of Infrastructure, which oversees roadways, parks. I don't think they include cemeteries, but roadways, parks, water, sewer. I think there's one other organization that they oversee, so they have a I don't think it's called an administrator, but they have somebody that oversees.
I think it's called a commissioner,
Commissioner of Department of Infrastructure.
'cause that was Ron LaBelle at one point.
Yeah, right, and that oversees all those.
Who's that?
Ron LaBelle,
Yes.
he's retired now, but
Yeah.
that's who it was.
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know who the commissioner is now, but
Yes.
that's their structure.
So again, our director of treatment and resources, we just lost that person for one of the communities that I mentioned before. Again, it was a small amount that was requested by them. And again, to speak as to you said, none of these are what people are making, or are gonna make if this ordinance is approved. This is all based on, every year, my budget comes down here, my rates come down here, and everything is scrutinized, and everything is discussed. So again, this is looking at comparables. To find replacements for myself, I don't have a deputy at this time, or any of the other directors. I think you'd be real tough to find them at any of these not to exceeds.
So the communities that don't have, so we're set, and I understand we're set up a little bit different. So we have an administrator and a deputy. Those salaries combined would be about 200,000. Are these folks doing both jobs? So New Bedford, for instance, that's making 206.
Yep.
You said they just have a deputy administrator, they don't have an administrator. So that is their top spot. Are they doing both positions?
They have a commissioner as well that's on top of the deputies, from my
Oh, they have
understanding, of
a-
their structure.
I see.
That's my understanding of their structure.
But their commissioner, just as Mr. Ferlin just indicated, I believe, oversees a much bigger group of departments.
Okay. Okay.
That's correct, right?
That includes parks and highways.
Anything further from the council? Council Dion?
I just have one more comment. And this is strictly the position. It has nothing at all to do with the individual. So the mayor runs for office, and I'm not talking this mayor, just mayor as a term, knows what his salary is. Doesn't matter how many years they're in office, that's the salary they receive, because the mayor gets paid this much money to run a city. I think underpaid, quite frankly, but that's beside the point. City council makes X number of dollars to be city councilors. I believe there are positions in the mayor's office that are what I would consider political positions, because when the mayor goes, the person in the position goes. In other words, they're not career positions. And I think that I consider two positions to be that, and I think they're both overpaid. We have people who've worked for the city 20, 25, 30 years who are who are directors, that don't make as much as positions that I would consider political positions, that I would feel those positions should be lowered. You accept the position, you know this is what you're gonna make. If the mayor serves 1 term, 2 terms, 5 terms, this is your salary. It doesn't go up. That's just my feelings on those positions that we just, I think I just think compared to what other people are doing, and not to say they don't work, but then they're not career positions. It's not something that they expect to be there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're political positions. And I think something like that can be reduced to help in terms of budgetary needs as well. So with that, I yield.
Which positions, Counselor Dion?
One specifically would be chief of staff.
Correct, which is, if this passes, it's going to change from not to exceed to a contract,
contract.
correct?
Mhm.
So then the only say that the council has in that is during the budget.
That's correct.
I mean, if you look through the list, you have administrators that make 86, 85 after 30 years,
Mhm.
75, 65, and you have a chief of staff making 84. Again, has nothing to do with the individual. To me, it's the position. It kind of goes with whoever's mayor at the time. That I
Did you
yield.
want to make an amendment to this salary schedule?
I think that one should be reduced.
Well,
I
do
don't
you-
know what the opinion is of anybody else. I mean, I would take that into consideration.
I think the first thing would be for it not to go under section 5302. It's currently in section 5301.
It's currently in 302. What I believe I'm hearing said, it should be moved to 301. It's currently in 302, because it's currently by contract.
But it has a not to exceed.
Right. So, with that said, we don't know, I wasn't here in 17 when this was done. I don't know what the real intention was that it doesn't, should it have been per contract with no not to exceed, or should it have been in 301 with a not to exceed?
Right. And I would agree with Councilor Dion. That's a position that you come into, whoever does it, and you know that it's usually comes and goes with the administration. And when it's put in the perspective of, we have department heads that have been here for an awfully long time as employees of the city, and they're not making that or making something similar to that, I would agree on that.
So that recommendation would need to be similar to the city engineer, but in the reverse. So we just move the city engineer out of 301 and put the city engineer in 302.
Mhm.
What your recommendation would be is to move that position out of 302 and put it in 301, and then assign the not to exceed.
Correct, and I wouldn't, whatever this position's already paying, they're already getting that, I wouldn't reduce their salary. I think it would be something that we'd have to take up with, or put some caveat in there that person gets it until,
And change it for the.
and then change it for the next one, because it's not fair to take anything away from anybody. But I do agree with that line of thinking. We have people that we're losing, because they're going other places where they make more, and they've been with the city an awfully long time, and that is a very good salary, in my opinion. So the amendment,
Can I say something before we make a decision on this?
sure,
The way I look at it, the mayor gets a budget for his office, and then the mayor decides where he wants to spend that money on salaries, et cetera. Not, that some other mayor come in, might get a different chief of staff who maybe doesn't have the experience, maybe they're not bilingual, maybe they're trilingual, they're gonna look at that. That's up to the mayor and how he's gonna establish, he or she is gonna establish that office. If the council doesn't like that, during budget time, you can reduce from the mayor's budget. You know what I mean? For us to limit it here, I don't think, sounds good, but is it something that's really gonna help? Are they gonna give them a stipend after? We're gonna give you this, but the stipends I hate, to be honest with
yeah,
you.
we shouldn't be giving stipends.
I agree 100%, we shouldn't be giving stipends, but when people want more money, that's the way that they went around us to do that,
If they have the salary amount in
you
their,
know?
In their budget.
in their budget.
Right. So, I don't know, I just think whatever mayor comes in, they do their own office. We always got, as councilors, we always got an increase every year, the cost of living increase. But when the 9C, and so did the mayor, but when the 9C cuts came in, a motion, a resolution was filed on the floor for us not to take the cost of living any longer, and we didn't. It was, I think, a unanimous vote, and we didn't take the cost of living. But if you look at councils that work all over, New Bedford gets what, 20, 24? I mean, obviously, we do it because we love it. We're not doing it for the money, but if you looked at, you know, the work that you do, that we all do, you know, maybe we get $1 an hour, but we do it because we do. And we did that for the 9C cuts. Primarily, we're not taking anything, but to be able to give that to people who worked here, to give that percentage to them. I just think that anybody in the mayor's office, a mayor decides how he wants to spend the money on salaries to give to people. And if he's spending it foolishly, he or she wouldn't get reelected. That's, you know, we can't have control over everything. And sometimes I think, you know, we want to stifle or control. Yes, we want people to watch their pennies, to, you know, save money so that we don't have to burden the taxpayers. But we can't control everything unless you want to run for mayor and then control it. That's it. With that, I yield.
So I would agree with you, Counselor, except for the fact that, so what, if we made changes at budget time, then it becomes often a very uncomfortable conversation because it ends up involving a person in that position. And I think it should be something that should just be across the board.
Well, it would be a problem with the positions in 302 anyway, because they're by contract.
Mhm.
So the contract.
So we
would
wouldn't have
already
any
been
choice,
signed.
right? And we wouldn't have any say over that. Counselor Dion?
Yeah, I don't think this has anything, and not from my perspective anyways, has nothing to do with control, has nothing to do with anything beyond the fact of equity and fairness. You're worried about people leaving the city for other positions who aren't being paid enough money, but don't want to decrease someone who is here temporarily. To me, that just doesn't make sense. To me, that's backwards thinking. I would rather take that, just for sake of numbers, take 10 grand and give it to a different department head that we're trying to keep here, that we know there's gonna be longevity. So from my perspective, it has nothing to do with control or anything otherwise. I think, myself personally, the state rep makes 70 grand. So a chief of staff can't be happy making 70 grand for 2, 4, or 6 years? I mean, and again, has nothing to do with the person. You know, it's more for me geared towards keeping quality people who want to work for the city and stay with the city in an engineering position or a planning position or something, something of that nature. With that, I yield.
So, Mrs. Sahadi, we would have to, at this time, if we wanted, if it was the will of the committee, move that, make an amendment to move this out of 302 and put it back in 301, and then we could
Set
address it
policy.
at that time? Because I also think if this position is currently getting the AFSCME increases,
Well, actually, this position right now, the contract is now written that they get CPI.
okay,
So in some years, it's less than ASME, and in other years, it's more than ASME.
and if that's how the contract was written, then that's how we need to address that if it moves to 301, so that, that is put in there, and then it's changed for a next chief of staff, if this person was to leave. That would be, my recommendation would be to amend this to move this into 301, and then we can address the not to exceed at that time. It would come back down in that section, correct?
I don't know, can they do it on the floor this evening?
You can,
Okay.
as a recommendation to the full body.
Okay. Do you
That
have
requires a
anything?
motion, I would make the motion.
So a motion made to move the chief of staff position out of section 5302 and into section 5301. It's been made by Council Dion,
Second.
seconded by Council Lee. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
What would be the not to exceed?
So could we when she brings it back down for 5301, can we determine it at that time, or do we have to do it now?
If you're recommending the amendment now, this would be the time.
Okay, so we would want to address the increases that were made in that contract. We wouldn't want to, if they've already been given, then we shouldn't take it away. So we would want the not to exceed, to be able to take those into consideration, and that would be for the duration of the contract. Is it a 1-year or 2-year contract?
I believe it's up for renewal right now, because it would be 2-year with the term of the mayor.
Okay. And that's what's in the contract, is the CPI?
CPI is in the contract.
So what,
So CPI for this year, I believe is going to be a little over 3%.
so what would
I'd have to look that up for you to be exact, but it's been running a little high.
so what number would you have as the not to exceed to address the terms of the contract?
Well, if the particular position is being paid 84 now, and let's just assume the CPI is 3, we don't know what the CPI is gonna be for next year. If you assume another 3, then whatever that calculates out to be, I can calculate that.
5% would be 4,200?
Yeah, but it's on top of so let me just, if you don't mind.
But right now, that's the salary making, right?
Right.
You can't reduce the salary.
No, we're not
No.
reducing it, but if that,
No, this is moving forward.
but we want to make sure if that person was
So it
promised.
would be 89,144 if you had made the assumption that both years CPI is gonna be 3. So you might wanna go to 90.
Okay. So would the amendment be to move it to section 5301 with a not to exceed of 90,000?
Roll call.
Yes, for,
Yeah.
any further discussion?
Do we need a roll call?
Do we need a roll call on that?
You don't have to, but you can if you'd like.
Roll call.
On the amendment, Councilors Kadim, Dion,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Pereira,
Yes.
Chair Libby Lavelle.
Yes. Motion carries on the
That with
amendment.
the discussion moving forward, we'll change that.
Right.
Yes, and we'll have to figure out
That'll be reduced.
how to address that, because this is just for this person's
So
contract.
this would take us to, theoretically, this is gonna take us through the next 2 years, at which time, we would have to have an amendment to this particular position, reducing the not to exceed from 90 to whatever.
Okay. And then the other amendment I would, because this is for 3 years, correct? I would
Correct.
request that the minimum, Director of Minimum Housing, that not to exceed, and it would be the will of the committee as well, is moved to either, it's currently at 65, and it's moved to either 70 or 75.
I'd suggest 75 based on the fact that, I don't have the comps on that, but if I recall looking at it, it was extremely low.
It is low. So my motion would be to, for the Director of Minimum Housing, to amend the recommended 65, not to exceed, to 75.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Yes.
The chair technically really make motions. You can second, but you can't make that
All
initial
right.
motion.
Maybe somebody else will make it for me.
Just as an FYI.
And that would be, current salary is at 53, and that would take it through the next 3 years if,
What was the number?
75.
75?
yeah, so the recommended is
Director of
65, which is
Minimum
low.
Housing.
It's Director of Minimum Housing. Again, it's up to the administration if they were to increase this position as they see fit. But it is incredibly low.
And it would have to be for the 23 budget at this point.
Right.
Right.
Next fiscal year.
Well, anything would have to be for the 23, but we don't address these for 3 years, so
Right,
this would
usually,
take
that's correct.
it through the next
That's
3
correct.
years if
Well,
that.
some of them, as I indicated earlier this evening, if you look in the budget book, some of them, the other personnel services have been addressed. I believe the position right above it we've included an amount
Mm-hmm.
to compensate for that shortfall.
Okay.
Certainly not to exceed, even if we adjust it to the 110, but
Mhm.
to something that is more comparable to what that person should be paid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sorry, are you talking about the minimum housing or you're talking about the one above it?
The one above it.
Okay.
I believe the one above it is definitely in the budget.
For,
I'm not sure from what amount, but it's in that other personnel services. I'd have to pull my worksheet.
I can, okay. Because I know the worksheet that came down to us just had the smaller, whatever was promised, which I think was 3,000 and something,
Yeah,
several years ago. Okay.
I believe you're correct.
Okay, so if one of the other counselors would like to make that amendment, that would be lovely. If not, we'll move along.
What's the amendment for?
To increase the recommended on Director of Human Housing,
To
to
exceed
I agree, that's
75.
low.
to not to exceed 75.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Amendment made for the not to exceed for Director of Minimum Housing Standard Inspectional Services to be 75,000, made by Council Pereira. Is there a second? I can second it.
You can.
Second.
Roll call, I guess.
Any discussion? Roll call?
On the motion, Council Kadim, Dion,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Pereira,
Yes.
Shayla Libby LaBelle.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
And the one above it, you want to decrease to 110?
Huh?
The one above it? So what would, so this is going to keep with the AFSMI?
I personally think the rest of it is
Should
pretty
stay?
good.
Yeah.
We've worked on it, so I'd make a motion that.
Okay.
Actually, I apologize, I have one other question, or before you make that motion, Councilor Pereira, and it's the Veteran Service Director. I know we did the comps on that one. The current salary is 64. The recommended not to exceed is only 70, and I know even that 70 is low compared to other communities, but I believe this position is also getting a stipend. Is that correct?
I believe it's just an auto stipend for travel.
So do you know what that is? How much?
1,500, well, in this particular case, I believe she's getting 2,500.
So I mean,
Which
I would
is
rather see
unique.
it in the salary so that,
Normal auto allowances are 1,560, but I believe in her case, when she was hired, the agreement was 2,500.
okay. I just
But I
don't,
agree with you, I don't like stipends, so.
right, and I don't think this, if she's at 64, or whoever goes into this position is at 64, with the increases over, I think we're gonna be past that 70. That would be the only other one I would motion that either move to 75 or 80, so that we are fine for the next 3 years, and I'd rather take that stipend out and put it in the salary.
I agree, I hate stipends.
You know, this is the concern I have. We're looking now at increasing someone who just got here versus someone who had been here for a long time and wanted a raise, and if would have gotten a raise, would have stayed.
Which position is that,
The
Counselor?
Director of Veteran Services.
Right, no, but
Well,
which
couldn't get a
position?
$2,000 raise, so we're gone. And now, you know, this is what it came in at, and there is a stipend for travel, and the stipend for travel was 25 because she lived further away, correct?
I'm
Than a
not,
lot of
I'm not
them.
sure what the purpose was, but.
But they got a
it's
stipend.
the stipend is higher, her stipend is higher than this general stipend for.
So my
And there's an
concern,
additional person in the office to help out.
My
That
con-
one I won't vote for.
my concern about it is not is that it's going to be over if you were to put the stipend in the salary. Because if the stipend is not in the salary, they don't get,
No, but that stipend is an auto stipend, so it's supposed to be in lieu
Separate?
of gas. So it's supposed to be in lieu of going to the garage and filling up.
okay. So
Which
that,
is another policy that the city really needs to work on, because we have some individuals that go fill up
Some don't.
and some get stipends.
and where is that policy? It's not anything that we
It's
have.
not written.
It's not written, okay. So
That was
this,
the policy that years ago,
So it's
if
a
we were supposed to have a
non-policy
card,
policy.
and when they had the card, they would go and they would swipe, and
Being
you'd know how
honest.
much gas they put in. Then the policy
Appreciate your
changed to
honesty.
having a gas attendant there. And then that, we needed another worker, so we took them off of that. So then the policy is people go and fill up and nobody knows who's taking what.
All right, so this is separate outside of salary,
And-
just
yep.
for gas.
That's
So the
right. Throwing
70
it out
will
there.
cover it for the, but nothing's in writing on that.
The stipend, her current stipend, I believe, and don't hold me to this, but I
No, it's fine.
believe her stipend, because it was higher, is in writing.
Okay,
But the others that receive a stipend,
is not
no, it's policy,
It's a standard.
unwritten policy.
unwritten policy, okay.
Actually, it might be in the ASB contract, right? It's in the ASB contract, so they're following the contract.
So-
Even though they're not ASME employees.
So, Mr. Hadi, this, not to exceed 70, my concern is that it's only, that will take into consideration this AFSMI increases for the next 3 years, and that will be fine? We won't be short? It's my
Sure.
concern.
Well, we may, I mean, I can't guarantee you what ASME is gonna settle out. I would think the answer to your question is yes, you should be fine, but I don't have that crystal ball with what the ASME contract's gonna settle out.
Okay, because it seems as if the other ones were raised quite a bit to make sure it covers that.
Well, a lot of the others were raised based on comps too. So in this particular case, I believe the few communities that we looked at, the veterans agent was being paid around the 70 mark. I
Around
don't have-
70?
I don't have the comps with me, but
Okay. Council Lee?
Well, just to your point, Ms. Council Ferrer, I liked the person before and I like the person now. I like them both, all the same. None of my no votes are personal at all. I like Mr. Furlong. I like everyone that, works and I know they all work hard and I know a lot of stories that how hard you work. So it doesn't fall in deaf ears. You know where my focus is. I hope you know where my focus is. And regarding the Veterans Service Office, I mean, I'm a veteran myself, and I would love to see, veterans taking that position, being paid, a good salary. It's just that, again, my focus is on the people who have to pay these salaries and the condition of the city, not just the condition of the city government, but the condition of, Councilor Dion mentioned it, we have a very low income amongst families and amongst individuals in Fall River. It's not high. It's not high in the state at all. And comparing, we should start comparing those numbers to other communities before we start to raise up everything on everybody. So, again, no shot at Ms. Brito, because I do appreciate her, but I'm voting no to this as well. There's no way I could justify
Well,
a
there's no
raise in any
amendment on the
way.
table.
Oh, I thought there was. I thought
No.
we were gonna do a
Nope.
10,000.
It's just discussion.
Increase. Okay.
Nope, it's just discussion.
All right, I yield
And
on that.
from 64 to 70 is the assumption of 3% increases each year. And
In the
it's-
AFSMI, and that will cover
and
it?
It's quite unlikely ASME will
may
settle
not
for
even
Okay,
3 for each year, but that will take you to 69,997.
and that was based on comps as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion that we send with the amendments we've made to full council for approval.
A motion made by, is there any further, anything else from the council before? A motion made by Council Pereira to, approve as amendment? Pass through first reading
As
as
amended.
amended. Is there a second?
So we're not reducing any of these?
Council Dion, do you have a question?
So, administrator, community utilities recommended is 140 from 108.
The not to exceed is recommended, right, current salary is 108. Current not to exceed per ordinance is 103, that does get the ASME increases, and then the recommended in this chart is not to exceed 140. Not that it will be going to 140. I feel like I have to keep saying that.
And again, I mean, this applies to all the positions as far as I'm concerned. That's where I become not comfortable, because, right, there's nothing saying it's gonna get that high, but there's nothing stopping it from getting that high. And I think that's part of.
Well, in the case of all of them, it would be the budget
Right.
not being passed would stop that. The water department budget comes down separate, but again, it would be a vote of the council on that budget as well. Would we be able to make changes on that one as we are the other budget?
So any of the so anything that we're agreeing to in here can, during the budget process, can be amended at that time?
Yes. The council can vote no and give the reasons why, or give recommendations prior to the adoption of the budget for the administration to change different things.
And just to be clear, to be fair, is that, remember that you vote the 3 categories in the budget. So if it happens to be a budget with a number of individuals in it, you would be voting to decrease salaries and wages, the total. I mean, you could certainly during discussion, discuss the particular position that you're looking to decrease.
But it's the overall number, it's not.
That's correct.
It's not the line item,
Right.
individual numbers.
That's correct. So you're not taking a person and saying, I want to reduce this position. You're reducing based on the appropriation order, salaries and wages in total for that department.
And then how they structure it is up to.
Right. So in Mr. Ferland's case, water, sewer are separate. You do it for water, you do it for sewer. On the city side, you would do it for at the department level.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
Can I yield?
just to address that, so then the administrator of community utilities, which one is that under?
Sewer,
It's in sewer as a whole.
yes.
And the deputy administrator? I know it's vacant, but where is that?
Sewer.
Also
It was-
sewer?
It was past budgets in sewer, yes.
Okay.
So just to, kind of put names to them, because I know to some extent, that's how I have to do this. So the administrator was Terry Sullivan.
Yep.
And Mr. Ferland was the deputy.
Yep, and they're both under sewer,
So when he stepped up, that deputy position was not filled.
correct. And we only have Mr. Sullivan on a consulting basis,
Right,
correct?
that's correct.
He's only an operator of the water treatment plant. He doesn't do it.
Is the deputy position not filled because we can't find anybody?
So my hope is to advertise that sometime in the near future potentially. When I moved up to the position, it was advertised, there wasn't any candidates at that time that could fill that position.
Okay. And was the pay scale the reasoning?
I would say that the pay scale would definitely be part of the reason to try to get somebody, somebody that has that's an engineer, somebody that has the licenses that are required for that position, a water license, distribution and treatment, as well as sewer licenses, as well as, so evaluators, construction supervisors license, were all requirements and recommendations for that position. So to get a qualified candidate at the, what we were advertising at was tough. And I'm finding that same issue advertising right now for the director of water treatment.
Okay. Do you have something further?
Just
for
a
Dion?
question. So where we seem to have some discrepancy, so to speak, and some differences of opinion on some of these, I know we have a motion on the floor, this is just a question. Would it make sense to send it to full council with, again, it would require a second motion if the first one failed, I get that part, but with a negative recommendation, would that apply in this situation?
A negative recommendation, that would be it, so it would be the amendment passed, it would be, you would want to send it with a negative recommendation?
Where I think there's changes we want to see that need to be discussed moving forward further.
Can you expand on that a little bit? I just want to make sure I'm answering you.
Yeah, like,
Correctly.
well, in terms of some of the discussion we've had, that we feel like some are a little high, some are a little low, that maybe we're out of, line on some of these positions.
If there is any others that you want to amend, you can certainly do that now. and we can send it with further amendments.
I just feel like we've kind of at a, like on the veterans one, I think some of us feel it should be higher, some of us feel it shouldn't be higher. On the chief of staff, we had a difference of opinion.
The chief of staff has been amended, though.
It's been amended, yeah. All right, I'll just yield and see where we go.
All right, so the motion on the floor was to send through first reading as amended, made by Counselor Pereira. Is there a second? I will second it. Any further discussion? Roll call?
On the motion, Councilors Kadim, Dion,
Yes.
Lee,
No.
Pereira,
Yes.
Chair La Liberty LeBeau.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, guys.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned made by
Second.
Counselor Pereira, seconded by Counselor Lee. All in favor?
Aye.
So voted.